Hey, thank you for tuning in to Instrumental Intel. I am your host, music producer Achickwitbeatz, and I'm glad that you're here with me. Today's episode has music industry news, instrumentals by me for your inspiration, and later my special guest, the founder and chairman of Intercept Music, Ralph Tashjian, will be joining me. So it's going to be a great time. I'm really excited to be bringing this episode to you. So before I go ahead and drop that first beat, I gotta give a shout out to my home station, Grander Radio out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And with that, let's go. Hey, this is music producer Achickwitbeatz, and you're listening to my podcast, Instrumental Intel. Alright, I'm back with the Music Biz Brief. First up, SoundCloud is clarifying concerns about a clause in its updated terms of use that appears to allow user content to be used for AI training. After a recent article pointed out the February 2024 change, SoundCloud stated that it has never used artist uploads to train AI, and it does not allow third parties to scrape content for that purpose. Instead, the platform says AI is only used for features like recommendations, fraud detection, and content organization. However, they did not explicitly rule out future AI training. SoundCloud emphasized its commitment to artist control, transparency, and ethical AI development. Next, the sudden firing of U.S. Register of Copyrights, Shira Perlmutter, has raised alarms in the music industry. Just one day before her dismissal, her office released a report suggesting that training on AI copyrighted music without a license likely exceeds fair use, and warned of potential economic harm to artists. Her removal, following similar actions against the Librarian of Congress, has sparked concern that the Trump administration is siding with tech interests over creator rights. Industry leaders fear this could weaken protections for artists as AI companies continue lobbying for broader access to copyrighted works. Also, Intercept Music, a distribution and marketing platform for independent artists, has secured $50 million to acquire U.S. and Latin music catalogs. The company says it's targeting under-monetized catalogs and will use its AI-powered tools in marketing tech to boost earnings and reach. Intercept launched in 2022 with support from Method Man and offers access to major streaming platforms, DIY promo tools, and merch services. With over 2 billion streams across its roster, Intercept plans to expand its operations and catalog management efforts, especially in the fast-growing Latin music space. The company plans to acquire full or partial rights while maintaining relationships with original creators. So this supports Intercept's mission to empower independent artists and rights holders with transparent, data-focused catalog management. The funding will also expand their operations as they work to reshape music rights management. Next, Bill Ackman has stepped down from the board of Universal Music Group due to new executive and board obligations tied to recent investment. Ackman, whose Pershing Square firm has been a major investor in Universal since 2021, praised the company's leadership and future growth potential in his farewell statement. His exit follows their first quarter report showing 9.5% year-over-year revenue growth and comes amid the company's push for a U.S. stock listing and continued focus on an artist-centric streaming model. Also, Apple Music has launched a new global viral chart playlist on Apple Music and Shazam, showcasing the top 50 songs people are discovering through Shazam in real time. Updated daily, the playlist ranks songs based on weekly growth in Shazam activity, offering a snapshot of what's trending in the real world. The charts are also available on Shazam's website and can be filtered by country. Next, Apple Music and Universal Music Group have teamed up to launch Sound Therapy, a wellness-focused audio experience designed to help listeners relax, focus, or sleep. Available exclusively on Apple Music, the collection blends popular songs with science-backed sound waves like gamma, theta, and delta frequencies. It's part of Universal's growing investment in music wellness, supported by its in-house venture Solos. This taps into the booming global wellness market, expected to reach $8.5 trillion by 2027. Also in news, Merlin CEO Jeremy Sirota will step down at the end of 2025 after leading the organization since 2020. He'll work with the board to ensure a smooth transition as they search for his successor. Under his leadership, Merlin expanded its support for independent rights holders, navigating an increasingly complex digital landscape. A subcommittee has been formed to oversee the recruitment process. Next, France's Royalty Collection Society paid out nearly $1.5 billion to composers and publishers in 2024, up 12% year over year. Total collections reached $1.73 billion, with international revenue making up nearly half, thanks to growth across streaming and social platforms. Domestic collections rose just 2%. The Society also partnered with Deezer on an artist-centric publishing model and plans to launch a creator networking platform and endowment fund in 2025. And finally, Live Nation is bringing back its $30 ticket program for summer 2025, giving fans access to more than 1,000 concerts across the US and Canada. The lineup spans pop, hip-hop, Latin, country, and more, with artists like Halsey, Nelly, Avril Lavigne, and The Offspring. The sale starts May 21st, and additional artists will be announced throughout the summer. The $30 price includes all fees, but not taxes. Alright, and that's it for this week's Music Biz Brief. I'm going to take a quick pause for the cause, and then I'll be back with my special guest, the founder and chairman of Intercept Music, Ralph Tashjian. Keep it locked. Hey, this is music producer Achickwitbeatz, and you're listening to my podcast, Instrumental Intel. Hey, I'm Achickwitbeatz, multi-genre music producer and strategist to indie artists and labels. Visit Achickwitbeatz.com for resources for artists and instrumentals in various genres available for songs, vlogs, blogs, podcasts, themes, TV, film, commercials, and more. Once again, that's Achickwitbeatz.com. That's ACHICKWITBEATZ.com. Let's make something happen. Hi, thank you so much for tuning in to Instrumental Intel. I am your host, music producer Achickwitbeatz, and I'm so glad to announce that I have in the virtual building with me today, Ralph Tashjian, the founder and chairman of Intercept Music. And so, first of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to come and speak with me and the listeners. And if you could, maybe give people a little bit of background on what Intercept Music is. Well, actually, let's start with you first, the man behind it all. Your relationship with music and how you got started with this.
Sure. Achickwitbeatz, thanks. I appreciate the time. I love this. A big part of who I am and what I've done in my life and this great career that I've been fortunate to have, it's important to give back to me. So, if I can, I hope there's some words of wisdom here somewhere that could help young developing artists and labels to, help enhance their career and have growth. So that's really important to me. Thank you for the opportunity here.
Absolutely.
I started as a young guy here in San Francisco, California. I'm currently here now. I spend my time between Mexico City and San Francisco. We have an international company, Intercept Music, that I'm the chairman of, that I co-founded. But I started my career here in San Francisco promoting records. I got very lucky. I was a young musician, a drummer, a bad one at that. And there was no career for me as a musician. So I was able to get the next best thing, and that was promoting records. And at a young age, at 24, 25, I went to work for MCA Universal here in San Francisco and got promoted to Seattle and ran that market, and then got promoted to New York and ran that market and have nothing but wild stories to tell about that. And then I got hired by a company, 20th Century Records, in about the mid 70s, and I ran that promotion department for a number of years. And what an incredible journey on that one, because I was right behind and responsible for 2 Academy Award winning singles with Maureen McGovern, The Morning After, and there was another one in there, and then all of the Barry White stuff, Love Unlimited. I marketed and promoted all of that from the inception. So that's my, I have a few gold records behind me, and those are my favorites. Okay, so I was very fortunate, and then went to from there went to Island and spent some time at Island before it was Def Jam, and Marley and Robert Palmer and all of that stuff, and then from there. In about 1980, I started promoting records independently. At that time, there was, people that had real relationships with radio stations that could actually move the needle and get records played. I did that for quite some time, for about 10 years. And that was like it was like a hired gun, right? Just going out and getting records played. And I remember exactly where I was, and I looked at myself in the mirror and I go, wow, this is not what I want. This is not what I did. It was like, let's make a deal. I've lost, the whole, the love that I have for music. So I started my own label in 2000, and it was a hip hop label, primarily out of the Bay, and we had a lot of killer mic. We had some international stuff. We had Rakim, and then all of the local stuff. A lot of the local hip hop stuff, West Coast hip hop stuff. We did really well for a lot of years. We did really, really well. And one of the things that I like to tell young people and anybody in general that, was building their career, building their business. When you're an entrepreneur, you just go, right? And you have to be able to have the instincts and the savvy to look at the marketplace and know when it's time to shift and maybe to reinvent yourself. Maybe if it's a creative thing, maybe your beats are dated. Maybe you need to update your sound. I don't know. I'm not a creative person. But what I've been able to do, it's a gift, is that I've been able to reinvent myself. And when I saw that things weren't going the way that there was any future, I was able to, adjust. So I had the label, and it was, I had some hits, and I saw a big hole in the Latin market. So I started to move into the Latin market and do a little bit of that, and had a top 10 hit with a Daddy Yankee protege, little kid named Miguelito. He was the youngest person ever to win a Grammy.
Wow.
And we put out a record, and we went to top 10 in Billboard, and I think we sold about 2,000 CDs. And I said, okay, it's either take your toys, Ralph, and go home, or it's time to reinvent yourself one more time. And so here I am, Intercept Music. So I knew I had to go into the digital space. The writing was on the wall. We had the old traditional deals at record companies where they really owned everything. They were accounting to you 6 months after the release and paying you 90 days after that 6 months. Well, that was virtually impossible to compete with a digital distributor that was paying the artists every 30 days.
Right.
You don't compete. So here we are. I said, okay, well, this is what we've got to do. And I started to build Intercept Music along with my partner, Todd Turner.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that I talk about something that I want. It was a miserable failure for about 2.5 years. I completely had the wrong developers. I had the wrong people. I had the wrong thing. And I was able to adjust and get out of that. And until I found my partner, Todd Turner, who's a tech genius, we weren't able to build a company now where we have billions of streams, hundreds and hundreds of artists and independent labels. We built a platform that we think is second to none with respect to two things that are critically important in everything that you read about independent music, independent distribution, independent distributors, and the digital world. That is transparency and customer service. And we've done those two things. And we do those two things, which separates us from our competitors.
Absolutely. I know, at least as far as distribution goes, I've seen and heard so many different complaints, and those are the top two complaints that people have with some of the popular distributors.
No question.
Yeah. So, I mean, your experience lets you know that that's kind of what you needed to focus on. Can you talk a little bit more about what the distribution process is like using Intercept Music?
Yeah. We like to call it technology with transparency. How to transform how you release your music. We created a dashboard that allows, let's say you're an independent label and not an artist, but a label. Mm-hmm. We've created a dashboard where an independent label can come in, sign up as a label, and then have all of the artists that they sign underneath them, basically white label, come through our system. And with their dashboard, they can manage their label. And inside of their label, they could show their artists what their streaming numbers look like and what kind of revenue they generated, without them seeing all of the other artists on that independent label.
Nice.
So it's designed and created for the, independent labels and artists as well, but we like labels. And there's another component that we put to it that we're really proud of, and that's the merch component. So we have merch on demand. We have a direct link through Shopify. The artist gets 30% right off the top.
Nice.
So if they sell a $20 t-shirt, they make 30% off of that, which equates to about 5,000 streams. So every t-shirt you sell financially is the equivalent to about 5,000 streams.
Wow. That's just so bizarre, looking at the the way that things are set up these days. And so, mainly with the experience that you have, for going back to when you started through what you've seen now, how challenging do you think that is for artists to actually understand the economics of it and how streaming is set up to benefit?
Yeah, it's everything, like in life, is a double-edged sword. There's pros and there's cons, and there's, believe it or not, there's a lot that's the same. Okay, so if you had a single in the 60s, you still had to market it. However you marketed it was whether it was radio or whether it was going around to DJs yourself and bringing it to them. Now today you have social media. You still have to market it. I don't know how many million songs a month are coming out, right? And you have to rise above the noise. That's a term we like to use. It's marketing is a critical key and social media is a critical key into the success of an artist and a label today. And how you communicate with your artists, with your fans, is critical. And so we think that that's a big part of growth. One thing we've been able to do is we've incorporated some AI, not AI music, but AI that can help you create a marketing plan designed for you, rather than a marketing plan designed for an artist that doesn't, that you can always create an elaborate marketing plan with an endless amount of money, but nobody has that. You need to create a marketing plan for yourself, how to advertise, where to advertise, what playlisting you should do in order to get from here to there, something that makes sense based on your budget, based on your socials, and based on how many followers, listeners you have, monthly listeners you have on Spotify.
Okay.
So we've incorporated some of those things.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there are a lot of positive uses for AI in music. I think a lot of times lately it's just kind of synonymous with generative, but there are so many other ways that it can help with technology. So yeah, aside from just creating music, just to be able to market it, and there's a lot of different things. I actually did a blog post about it a while back, just because I kept hearing so many things like, okay, AI is bad for music. Well, there's other ways to use it besides what most people are thinking that doesn't replace creators.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And if it's used properly, it could really, based on your, if you plug in the right information, and we had to create that how to speak to it, right? But you create what genre it is, country, urban, hip hop, pop, rock, or whatever, and how many followers you have, what your socials look like, and how you should market to take yourself to the next level. It'll give you a pretty accurate outline of some things that it recommends that you should do. Now that doesn't mean you do them all, but it means that you pick and choose, and at least you have something to base whatever you're spending the money on. One of the other things that we use AI for that is really interesting, because one of the things that we've noticed with independent artists, especially, not labels so much, because if it's an independent label, there's normally some sort of a label manager that's making sure the artists do their posts frequently or the right way, or get their messaging out right. So we use AI to help you create posts, and we have a technology in our platform that allows you to post on all of your socials from our dashboard,
Nice.
scheduled out for 30 days in advance. And you could use AI to help you create the posts, maybe using the lyrics of the song or whatever you program into it. We have that in our system. And then it'll give you 30 posts to put out, and you could edit those posts. Oh yeah, that's corny, I don't want to do that. But at least it gives you ideas or something to think about. You take them or you leave them.
Right.
So it's a sophisticated platform.
That's excellent. And just to think about the time that it would save, because I know how long it takes to, kind of consider like, okay, what am I going to post here?
You're thinking, well, you need ideas, right, in order to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
So I think it helps.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would like to ask about the recent 50 million that you have for music catalog acquisition. First of all, congratulations.
Wow. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a big deal. And it's interesting because there's a lot of money out there for catalog acquisitions. Now, our company, Intercept Music, is you would consider us somewhere in between a Virgin, Universal, and a DistroKid, for instance. Okay. We're in between. We're that company that's a little bit more, that we feel that we're more, it's about, we're not there to just put out a single, and we're there for the artists and the labels that are a little bit more serious about their career, right?
Right.
And these catalog acquisitions that are happening at a high level, okay, are really these are really just to make it. These are primarily Wall Street people. Yeah. They're not necessarily music people, because they see an asset. Asset is like a piece of property, right? You hope that it goes up in value based on what's going on around it. So they're big deals, right? They're catalogs that are being acquired, and they're able to be monetized because they're X amount of monthly listeners, and how much money it's generating every month, and there's a certain multiple that they use as a formula, and that's how they come up with a number. But there's a whole new part of the catalog pieces, which kind of where we fit, that's in between, just like our company. Our company's in between, a TuneCore and Virgin. There's catalogs out there that are in between. Some that aren't generating a lot of money, but there is a long-term value to them. Some are gospel catalogs, which I've got 2 great ones right now. And so some of them are monetized currently, and some of them, I had a call this morning with one that just has all of the content, some on DAT, some on Reel, wow, some on quarter inch, some on different, and here it is. So yes, we're here. It's like a self-propelling model for our distribution company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so I'm going to try to be careful with how I word this question, because I'm not trying to get you to give out the secret sauce or anything. But what are some of the things that you look for with these acquisitions? So, you mentioned like with the, bankers and stuff actually coming in, investing in the assets. A lot of this stuff kind of tends to be evergreen. So are you looking for like a certain feeling, or, just the talent base for when you choose?
No, we're looking at potential revenue.
Okay.
So some, like the financial, like the institutional financial company waves of the world that have gotten big funds to go out and do this. Yeah. They have a formula right now. Look, use Springsteen as an example. They can probably come up with a valuation to buy the Springsteen catalog. Not that would be for sale, because it's probably still with Columbia, but just using that as an example, based on what they're currently streaming. Those numbers are there. At the statements year or two of statements from Columbia Records, and they can see that every Springsteen title, how much Springsteen's generated, and that's how they would base their offer.
Yeah.
It's pretty much sometimes it's 6 times, it could be up as high as 10 times yearly revenue. Now, other ones that are on DAT and quarter-inch tape, it's kind of a little bit more of a kind of a gotta get a feel.
Yeah.
We had one this morning that had great gospel content, Reverend James Cleveland, and a number of different things, and we'd have to kind of guess along that, right? We'd have to guess that. So it's a formula, and some of there are companies that just appraise some of these catalogs as well, just like you'd go out and get a house appraised.
Yeah. A lot of people listening probably don't know this, but my background before actually diving into music, I got my bachelor's in marketing and my master's in finance. And so, yeah, it was actually doing stuff, like the price to earnings ratio and all that.
Yeah,
so,
you get this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I get what you mean. And, it's just kind of been interesting to watch all these deals and stuff that have gone down. So, yeah, that again, congratulations on the 50 million.
Well, thank you very much. It's been hey, listen, I want to just, this is hard work. You have to have determination. You have to believe in yourself. You have to not give up. You've got to keep moving forward no matter what. And that's my number one message to people, to entrepreneurs, people that really believe. You know what it is? You can't live in fear. You have to live in a world of faith and looking at things with limitless possibilities. Now, the trick with that is not being delusional at the same time. So you've got to watch the signs around you. But common sense, hard work, belief, that's the formula to success.
Wow. So many excellent gems. I really appreciate you for coming on and sharing your story, your experience, and, just kudos to you. I'm not seeing a lot of people who have the experience that you have, but still willing to share and teach so freely. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. And hey, it comes from the heart and it comes from love. I love what I do. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. And so to me, it's just what I do. My kids say to me, Dad, what, you're going to retire? I go, well, what am I going to do? Go to Home Depot and buy a drill? What would I do with it? Wouldn't know what to do.
You're right. Especially,
don't forget, there's a lot of opportunities out there for young artists today with YouTube, with the internet. Let's just one thing before people are discovering music today in ways that we never could imagine music would get discovered. Back in the day, there was only one way, and that was probably through some DJ on a radio station. Today, it's multiple ways. And the other beauty about today is that young people today, when I was young growing up, it was either listen to an urban station, an R&B station, a top 40 station, a country station, right? Kids today are hearing everything, and they don't put things in those kind of genres. If they hear a country track they like it.
Right.
If they hear an urban track they like it. Doesn't matter. They're not programmed like that. So there's endless opportunities, and it's always about, and it always will be about, from the beginning to the end, about the music. It's about the song. It's about the music.
That's so awesome. Yeah, once again, I just want to thank you again. The door is always open. Anything else you want to come back and discuss, I'd love to have you again. But yeah, thank you so much.
Anytime you'd like, we'll be there for you, no matter what. I can get some of our other people in the company as well that are pretty smart tech people.
I'd love that.
Content ID, really important, different ways to generate revenue.
Yes.
We have people. Let us know.
I'm a metadata preacher.
We're here to help. We're here to help.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chick with a Beat. God bless. Have a
bless.
wonderful, wonderful day.
You too. All right, and that's a wrap for this episode of Instrumental Intel. I've been your host, music producer Achickwitbeatz, and once again, I want to thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank my special guest, Ralph Tashjian of Intercept Music, for coming through and sharing all of his insight and experience. I'd also like to thank my home station, Grander Radio out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm excited to be coming back to you next week with another episode full of goodness. So make sure that you come back. Till next time, you know where to find me. Tune in, tell a friend. I'll see you then. Peace.